Right, so carrying on from my drift trike build, I got a bunch of extra parts here, mostly wiring from my friends at Banggood. Wanted to talk a little bit about sort of what I've got here and how I hope to use these pieces or these wires and connectors. And I also have a throttle unit that I want to show off here. So very quickly, just looking at some of the different products that I have here, a whole bunch of stuff, but a lot of it's duplicate. But essentially, the idea is I've got to run a number of lengthy wire runs from essentially the handlebar area of the drift trike back to the motor and controller. So I'm trying to minimize the amount of wires and wood I bring up front, because obviously the handlebars turn and don't want anything catching and getting ripped. There's also the need to sort of look at carrying power. So starting with that, I want to start with some 14 gauge XD60 connectors that I've got. Yes, I do have 5 of them to make a fairly lengthy run from the battery to the back. Essentially what my plan is that was if I was able to order sort of a single lengthy run, I would have done that. I really don't like building my own XD60 connectors. They're a real pain in the arse to solder these suckers together. You have to get them really hot, and sometimes you end up melting plastic. Typically good quality connectors don't melt as easily. That's how you always know if you've got good or bad. But anyway, this was easier for me. So the idea is that I'm just going to be, connecting a bunch of these. I figure I probably only need 3 runs, just short of a meter in total length to actually bring the power from the battery to the back end, now that I've got most of the trike done. In order to keep these sort of connected and safe, I'm going to run some heat shrink around here, and that'll keep them tight. But they're actually pretty good quality, really. I mean, these things take a fair bit to, I'm reefing on that pretty hard. They're very tight fits, very solid. I probably don't need anything on here, but what I'll do is I'll just do some of the heat shrink anyway, and then just zip tie this to the actual frame area. So that'll solve the problem for getting my power sort of to the back end. Alternately, I have the option of, these are lower gauge wiring, so I'm not so sure if I can use this for power. There were some other connectors that weren't, high current. They're still running higher voltage. The battery pack is actually a 48 volt battery pack. Higher voltage, but really low current, really just switching. So this is another option where I've got quite a distance here of essentially a 2-wire connector, standard barrel jacks that I can use as well to run if I'm looking to run any kind of switching. Like for example, they call it the lock key power connector, basically like an emergency on off. I can use this one for that, but I'm just going to gauge where I'm going with some of these other parts. So that's lengthy run of wire there. In terms of the wire quality, something else I want to point out too, and this guy especially. I've ordered these before. They're really good quality silicone wiring. They're not the cheap stuff that, after a month of sitting in the elements, they start to crack and break open. So there's good quality silicone here. So it's always important to know that for the wires you buy. Same with this, it feels like good quality. I think the jury will be out, but it's fairly flexible wiring, coating for the wire cover. So I think it would handle, again, being in the elements for a while there. Also wanted to show some other connectors that I'm looking at. Again, I want to be able to easily remove connectors from the front end of the drift trike to that connects to the back end. And I'm thinking about these guys here. In this case, it's a 5-wire connector that I'm looking at using for the throttle unit that I'm going to show you in a second. But essentially, again, it's a waterproof connector unit, 5-wire, so that guy just fits together like so, and then keep it secure. Right, you just tighten up, thread it up. If you can see that, okay. Thread it nicely, nice and tight. That keeps that. I'm not as worried about waterproof so much as just secure. A decent gauge wiring here. as well to carry you know, a little higher voltage, although I think it's a bit overkill for what I need, because again, it's not like I'm carrying high current for throttle control and whatnot, even though it's going to be using a couple wires to display voltage, the 48 volts. It's never high current, so it's not a big worry for the wires. But anyway, I'm going to probably wire that in place of this, which is what I want to show you next, the throttle controller. By the way, these other ones are just similarly 2-wire connectors, so for carrying power but having the ability to do quick disconnect is what I'm looking at for those guys. So this is the one that I wanted to spend a bit more time on showing off. Again, received from Banggood. The idea here is that this is a throttle control unit that has a number of different functions, including displaying the voltage of the battery to sort of give a gauge on the health of the battery. That's just a green protective cover, but it has 3-segment LED light display. So the intent is to show the state of the 48-volt battery, which typically, I think at full charge is what, 52 volts or upwards of 54. Again, this guy's got a 5-wire interface. The basic idea is that you've got your hall sensor, sorry, not your hall sensor, your throttle sensor wiring here. So essentially ground, usually I think it's 5 volts for the hall sensor, and then the hall sensor output here. So that goes back to the controller. That's a pretty standard interface. I'm probably gonna have to change out this connector because I've already been using a different connector, so no big deal. I can just cut that back and solder it. And then these two guys here are essentially, one is for bringing the voltage. Obviously it's a common ground, right? One's gonna bring a voltage display. I forget which one it was. Let me just double check here. We have instructions in Chinese, and then we have instructions in English. This is really hard to read. You're probably not gonna see this very well, but essentially up here, it tells you what wires do what. So again, these ones are the hall. The blue wire that controls the power lock output, essentially. So that is, you can see here, the switch right here, which is essentially the on or off, and between the ground and this guy, that essentially is like the emergency on off for the actual controller, which I like at the handlebars with quick and easy access in case need to do emergency shut off. I've also got a master shut off wired to the battery, and you'll see that in my other drift trike videos. But essentially I wanted this here, so that handles that. And then the yellow wire, again, that's the power positive. So that's gonna be used to display the voltage on here for this guy. So essentially that's all in all the throttle control. This is, you know, the actual lever here, so the grip will be here, and the idea is the thumb will actually be on here, the thumb control. So you got the grip here, and you'll just be using the thumb while this is turned to see that. Fairly lengthy wire here, so that should get me from, you know, the upper handlebars down to the controller at the back of the drift trike. Nice heavy duty flexible wiring, so I don't see any cracking issues there. So anyway, stay tuned. You can see this in my other videos. I'll be mounting this to the drift trike, and then we'll see how the whole thing comes together. Follow along on my blog. I'll post that probably up here, plastibots.com. You can see my build log for the drift trike, and you can see this stuff coming together on it. Thanks, take care.